how my writing really improved after I used to read a bunch of freshman writing as a professor. When you see shitty writing, you can, and then I rewrite like the introduction form, and then have them show you like this is what I did as your intro, blah blah blah, thesis statement. It made my writing a lot better.
It's true, and that's what the same is true when I help you. Anyway,
Hey, hey,
thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much.
Popcock, God
Pop
damn
talk,
it.
pop talk. I'll be here all week.
Greetings, everyone. Come on in and have a seat up front for the Funny Muscle Podcast. If you're here, then you're looking to learn how to create laughs like a pro. So please help me welcome to the stage your co-host to help you do that, economics professor and open micer Chris Stifler and comedian turned author Mike Lucas.
How's your coaching? Are you still coaching people?
Yeah. In fact, I got 2 sessions coming up next week. It's good. It's I don't force anybody to come to me, and I don't force anybody to read book with me. Typically people come when they're, when they've sort of run out of
You said,
options, and they need
I thought,
help.
did you say read? I thought you said read. I don't force them to read book. I thought you were talking about caveman. You said read book.
Oh yeah, what did you think I said?
I thought you said read book. I don't
Oh,
force
no,
them to
read
read
book.
book.
No, force them to read book.
Read book.
No, force them to talk people or to wipe ass. They do what they do. Adult. Yeah, they no, I don't force them to read book. Well, when I was a kid, I took piano lessons, and they made us go every week, and I was never ready for the next lesson in a week. It always took me longer. So I was, but they wanted to make money, so they forced the parents to send them the kids every week. And I didn't want to do that as a coach. I just wanted people to, if they need me, I'd help them, and if not, then I would just leave them alone. I follow up, and I ask them how they're doing, how their sets are doing. I watch their sets and stuff like that. But if to have a session, you don't want to waste their time until they're ready and they can benefit from the next level of steps that they're ready to take on.
Improv drills. If you have 10 minutes with me right now, let's do an improv drill. What would you say? Yeah, I'm just trying to improve my ability to think off like right there. You just took that read book and you suddenly went bop, 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 heightened it into a Soviet Union caveman type, and then bop, 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 couple jokes, joke, and you've heightened the bit right away. And so I'm seeing that as a skill that I need to work on. And so I'm looking for a drill or even
Well,
just
first
like
of
a,
all, do you operate that way when, like, with your friends, and like, do you make, like, I've always been a commenter. That's sort of my Aspie personality. I notice and notify, I interject and correct, I heighten and and offer advice unsolicited, and so it always occurs to me to do that. Does it not for you?
think I'm noticing myself at work and even with conversations with my friend that I am doing it more. Maybe I'm just more, maybe it's a availability bias, but I'm maybe more attuned to the fact I'm doing it. But I think I'm doing it more and getting kind of wisecracks in or getting laughs. I feel like I've scratched the surface on maybe heightening to like a second rung. Like
Oh,
you were like to the fifth rung right away as soon as I said read book. And I feel like I'm getting a little bit better at make hitting the second rung now. Like there's glimpses of it, even with our writing sessions and like the humor articles we're writing. I feel like I'm quicker. Like my
yeah.
synapses are fire.
That's from you. You've been flexing your comedy, your funny muscle. You've been heightening with the heightening devices, and now it's occurring to you to do that more often. You're seeing the opportunities for it to happen. You're seeing moments in maybe conversation or in your teaching where that floats above your head. It's like they say, when you're a professional and things are going well, the ball comes at you and it's the size of a softball, or the size of a beach ball, and instead of a hard ball or whatever. And so it kind of is that way with comedy. When you begin to use these heightening devices over and over and get better at them, you begin to spot all the places where they belong, and especially the opportunities where you can add that in there, and you have more confidence in doing it because you get what's happening. Oh, I get the game we're playing. We're doing a frog bank, and we need to heighten caveman and books, or 2 syllable words, or 2 syllable sentences that talk about me with a client. So there's games that you immediately spot, and like that you're putting some things together that come very naturally to me. So that's going to take you longer, but you're going to get better and it's going to be smoother with it the more you practice it. And then all of a sudden it's like taking the training wheels off your bike and you're just like, oh my God, I can't believe I've been riding this without any, balancing by myself. And what is Bloom that said comics or funny people are born, comedians are bred or made. And what he's saying is that you can be naturally funny in conversation, just from being good at these things instinctually. Maybe you grew up around some funny people, maybe you were studying it when you were little and watching it a lot, and maybe you just have a natural sense of humor. But then to do that in front of strangers and get paid for it, that's where you have to really begin to define your own comedy lens and your own funny muscle. And you have to really begin to practice that over and over again. Even the best, funniest people naturally have to do that. Like, when they first got up as stand-ups, they weren't that as good as they are today because they didn't get what it took to do that to people who don't know you yet.
I could think of that, like even that, like the Burro racing article we wrote about, and then you made up the Danny Stick Gloves McGee, and I saw that as a very clear example of heightening that I did. I was like, well, what does his wife say, or write that, and that was your heightening device. Write it from another perspective,
Yeah, different
right?
perspective.
And I was like, oh, boom, that's a joke there. That's
Yeah,
she can never
but that was
complain
good.
about her. Yeah, so that was like an example of me, like Thick Gloves McGee is the one heighten, right? But then like going to the bop, uh, what's the wife's perspective and getting a second joke out of that premise to
Yeah,
me
the
is
fact
like
that she can't
that's
complain about her day because this guy, day is so crappy, literally, and so
just shoveling shit.
yeah, and that's funny. Like that is something that most of us don't look at. We don't wonder what his wife is like. Let alone we didn't even know he existed until we invented him for this article. Like he's the one that handles the buckets of shit, that they're betting on, for these burro
Donkey race, yeah.
races. Yeah, and it's funny that his nickname is Thick Gloves. Like why on earth would anyone's nickname be that? So it's kind of funny because it's a kind of, again, overstating the obvious. I need thick gloves to handle shit. So there's a bit of that. There's funny specifics in there. The word thick gloves is it sounds funny coming out of your mouth, and then the fact
Even
that
but
she's got
Danny
a wife.
McGee's funny.
What's that?
Do you think McGee is kind of a funny sounding one of those
McGee?
like Pop
Yeah,
Tarts?
they're all like that's the thing is there are funny sounds. The K sound is a funny sound, and we talk about putting the punchline word at the very end of your joke, and a lot of that has to do with what the word sounds like. Is it pop, any of those things, like they help sell the punchline. And there's other ones that are softer that don't, and you can hear that when a good comedian delivers it, or a good comedian rewrites or rewords a joke. You can go, oh, I see why that's funny now, because now there's a at the end there or something like that. And it's not a guarantee, like, just because you say pop cock doesn't mean it's going to get a laugh, but well, it just did. See,
I could see
maybe it is a
I could see
guarantee.
that's a pretty funny bit, like a meta bit again. That's like you're teaching someone and he just does a premise and at the end just says like just some non sequitur. Popcock. Like,
My wife has a hard time cooking dinner for me. I swear to God, her food is terrible. Popcock.
am I doing it right? Am I doing it right? Is
Am I
that
doing it
right?
right? Is that
Coach,
fun?
comedy
Is that a
coach?
funny joke? You get it? Popcock. And then he calls it back, and then it keeps getting a laugh because popcock is funny. And I was going to try to think of a different version of that that's not funny. Well, I mean, you could say soda dick, and that's kind of funny too, because dick is a funny word. That's why people get laugh at dick, because it's and it comes out. And plus they're dirty. Anytime you can add a dirty reference, it's a cheap laugh. But especially if you're clean the rest of the way and then you throw that in there, it's a shock. That's what the dirty laughs are. It's all a shock laugh. It's all shock humor, and shock humor is it's hard to do well, but it's easy to do easy. With the two of us as an improv warm up, you could do a yes and exercise where you begin with each other a conversation and you say the words yes and you heighten whatever it is, you agree with whatever the other person said with a yes, and then you say and then you heighten it to a next level, and then that other person listens to that and they yes the thing that you just heightened, and then they and that, and then it leads to something else. We can try that right now if you want.
So if I just said, yesterday at softball, we lost to a bunch of 25-year-olds. My pitcher has gout.
Okay, so just as a note, you've offered us information now. You lost in a softball game because your pitcher has gout. Right. So you've given us you've heightened your own suggestion. So for the point of the exercise, you would probably try to do something more simple at first so that we can just build on it, and then maybe we get to where we have gout, and then that's sort of the humor of it. But you've supplied that already, and now
So I
that's a
shouldn't
lot of
have.
information for me to listen to. Because I could play the game that we all have. Yes, and our catcher has bad knees and shits his pants, and so that's heightened the idea that we're old and that we all have these things. So that would be one way to begin that game. But we're immediately into jokes. For the sake of the exercise, you could start with something like, "Boy, am I tired."
Yes, and I don't ask you a question, right? I have to add to why
We
you
try not
tired.
to, in improv, we try not to do any questions. We always try to do
Yeah,
statements,
sir.
because a
Oh,
question puts the onus on the other person to supply the information, whereas a
yeah, right.
statement
Yeah, yeah.
really do it. So the good thing about that is you can assign to
Oh,
me any reason in the world why I might be tired,
oh,
or any reason in the world that might be a bad thing.
so I shouldn't say, yeah, I can see that in your eyes. Your eyes are droopy today. I should, that's not a
That could
good,
be one. That could be a heightened, yes, and I can tell that because your eyes are are totally droopy.
I can see you intentionally put on a platter the ability for me to go anywhere. And
And then I listen
it's
to
the
where you
assist.
go, and then I adjust from there, because I could have some, like, I had two or three suggestions just there of where you could go, but I can't insist that it goes those places, because if I do, then whatever you say, I'm going to kind of ignore it and try to push it towards where I'm thinking, as opposed to really listening to you and wanting
Mm.
to heighten the thing you've said. So you said I have droopy eyes, so I could say something like, yes, and the sad part is that is a family trait. All of my family has droopy eyes. So now I've heightened that into, it's not just because I'm tired, it's because that's a genetic situation in my family.
So, and yes, and that's typical of a backwoods Kentucky inbred family.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, good. And now you've heightened why it is that way with my family. Exactly. And then I could say something like, and then we wouldn't be talking about this in between. I'm just
Right,
coaching
right, yeah.
because we're doing it for the first time. But and then I could say something like, yes, and that's why you saw us all at my sister's wedding to me, or marriage to me, I should say.
I remember that wedding.
You have to
The
say in the exercise, you say
oh
yes.
yes, yes, yes. I always say yes, and so
Yeah,
even if
just for
you
the exercise. In a real scene, we would subliminally acknowledge it, but in this exercise, we say yes,
always say yes, and.
and so as if to reinforce the rules that we're following.
Oh yes, and you had donkeys with coolers on their back delivering beer during the wedding reception.
Yes, and my father-in-law paid for all those with his mining money.
Yes, and I remember that mining money. It was measured in cubits of gold dust.
Right. Okay. So that could keep going and going, and we're heading into a different place now. It went originally from I'm just a little
Yeah.
tired to now it's we're at a hillbilly wedding where finance is done in cubits. So it's transformed into something different, which is the goal of good improv, and so
But then,
the key is to do that quickly.
but is there like a different phase of improv? Like we built the set, and then now we have the frog bank like are we now at the frog bank time where let's throw mining terminology at hillbilly wedding?
Like I
Like
told
can
you,
you feel when the frog bank started versus when you're building the scene?
yeah, I think that's part of when you in improv classes, we call that finding the game or discovering the
Yeah.
game.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
The
yeah.
game is what you and I call the frog bank, is the combining of worlds over and over again, including a little bit of each element, combined together. And that's what makes it funny, is because there's unlikely bringing together of these two unlikely worlds, and then we make sense of it because of our setup and our story. So let's try another one. Well, typically, you might even say, okay, one thing that makes it easier is typically for an improv, even for exercises, often what we'll do is we'll get a suggestion.
Yeah.
So you could ask me for a suggestion of, it could be something we might find in a house, something you might find in the woods, something you might find in a backyard. I need the name of a type of vegetable, or just anything like that to get you started. And that way it doesn't force you to like, have a preconceived idea of where you want this whole thing to go. So ask me for a suggestion first.
Give me a suggestion on a sport.
Tiddlywinks.
Last night I saw my neighbor kids playing Tiddlywinks on the street.
Yes. And every time a car would approach them, one of them would yell, car, and they'd have to pick up all the winks and tiddlies and take them to the side.
Yes, and they're so young they don't actually know what a car is.
Yes. And that's what led to one of them being struck on the shin by a bumper.
Yes, and you could see the blood stain on the Chevy Tahoe's bumper.
Yes, as well as the tiddlywinks that pelted the front windshield, blinding the driver.
Yes, and the driver was also distracted while texting on the phone.
Yes, and the car ended up, as a result, driving into the house of the parents of the Tiddlywinkers. So, and the thing that we're seeing here, and with with a yes and exercise, one of the things that's important is you have to yes and the thing that you're talking about that the other person said, but you're also remembering what the scene is. So, we're still talking about kids tiddlywinking in a road with the danger of traffic coming by. And so now we're heightening the idea of what happens when kids play tiddlywinks in the road and traffic comes by. And so, we've gotten to the point where there's a car that's, swerved or whatever and blinded by tiddlywinks, whatever those are. And right, and then it hits the, like we've all seen in the news where it hits the house, right? So now we've got that scene in our head. So now we've transformed from two kids playing a game to a house disaster, so that's good. That shows that we've heightened it to a place that's, it's not just about a really intense tiddlywinks game, but you could do that too, depending on who the two people are, the five people are doing the scene.
You even had like heightening devices in your that like made me laugh because like the idea of like it's the institution. You called him a tiddlywinker. You've then made a noun out of what is a funny already sounding game.
Right. And then I called out the winks and the tiddlies, like the funny specifics of the sport of tiddlywink, even though neither of us knew what they were, and we could have fun with that in a scene, and all those heightening devices are what you're using, because now you're using a different perspective. You're doing the driver coming through who's striking the tiddlywinker. So now you're adding. It's always about when you're heightening, when you're yes-anding, you're heightening, and so you're using those devices to do that. So it's a good exercise, right? It forces your mind to really stay focused on the scene, but also heighten it to a place that we're not expecting. And that's the thing. That's the thing about with comedy. Really good comics do that all the time, which is they make jokes, and then once the joke is and it's the same with improv scenes. You make a good scene or a good choice, a good scenario, a good punchline or whatever it is that you're doing, and then that's now fair game. And so when something's fair game, the cleverest people use it and call it back and bend it, twist it, refer to it, conjugate it, all sorts of things that you can now do because you've set that up as because once you say it, and especially if it gets a laugh, now it's fair game. So now if you don't reuse it, you're almost doing yourself a disservice. Yeah, that's another, like, if you want like a exercise to do, like, begin to blow up worlds, so to speak. So before you even begin to write a joke, you should be, especially if it doesn't all come naturally to you. Like a lot of us people who have been funny since birth, when you say a word in our brain a whole distribution system of subwords and sub thoughts and sub references comes up because we're so used to thinking that way. It just automatically goes and then we are ready to to frog bank those with other things. If it doesn't do that for you, then you got to start working on that muscle. You've got to start saying, spring water, and then you just go all the things about spring
Word
water,
map.
plastic
Yeah.
bottle. Is it really just hose water? Does it really come from the French Alps or from Fiji? Um, you know, all the different brands that you could have. And then you just begin to explore the world of spring water. Tap versus tap water, fancy restaurant, and then you just start to then, and that's where when people heighten in a really good way, it's because they have all those references in their head and they think of those before they think of anything obvious about spring water. You know what I mean? They have all these other things, and so their brain is just trained. Their funny muscle is trained to go to those other places, and that's what surprises people. That's what misdirects, or satisfies that misdirection in a surprising way.
Well, you want to talk about getting booked? Because I told you one of my goals of 2024, and you keep on giving me challenges, which is really helping my comedy. But one of the goals of 2024 for me was to get paid to do comedy. And whether that's, just a 5 minute or a 10-minute spot at a brewery or a smaller show. But that was one of the goals we established, you and I, as a coaching client. And so I kind of wanted to have a conversation about best practices on getting booked. And I'd love to hear your perspective because I think social media and the world today is different than. Did you hand people resumes, like a actual papyrus paper with your headshot on it?
In the
Like that's what I want
beginning,
to talk.
that's how you did it. You had a resume and a headshot stapled on the other side of it, and you would send that to them in one of those yellow business envelopes, or the tall
Vanilla.
8.5
Yeah.
by 11 manila. The vanilla one. I used the vanilla ones because the chocolate ones kept getting them messy. Thank you, everybody. I appreciate you being here. This is a great crowd, really, truly great crowd, vanilla. Wait, I was gonna go popcock.
Yeah, I was having a good callback. Yeah.
Popcock. But
The guy's a professional. The guy's a professional. Take
guy's a
notes.
pro. Guy's a pro. He's used popcock 5 different times, and each time it gets a laugh. It's great. Popcock. I don't even know what it is. I'm laughing. That's how good he is. So, yeah, as time goes on, we evolve how we get work and how we get people's attention. And nowadays, you'd be laughed out of the comedy club if you handed them a piece of paper and it's like, what do you want me to do with this? Like you want me to, what is it Mitch Hedberg's, but would you recycle this for me? Would you throw this out for me? That's what he said every time someone hands him a flyer. That's what he sees them asking them. Would you throw this out for me? Oh, Hedberg is the best. So now what you're going to do obviously is all electronic. So you're going to have a headshot online. You're going to have a resume online, which it lists the work experience you've had and if you've taken any classes and all that. But really, that's not kind of how to get booked at a comedy club. That's more how to score an audition for a commercial or something. With a comedy club, you're really doing all your auditioning with your bits, with your act. And so the key is to get a guest spot in front of the booker or the owner. And that's what you're really trying to do if you really want to get work. And so a lot of this article is about how to get that to happen. How do you get the owner or booker to see you as somebody that's worth paying? And when you're beginning, chances are you're vying for an opener or a MC spot. I should say MC or an opener spot, because the MC spot is going to do the least amount of time. The opener is going to do the second least amount of time. So if you're an MC, you should have at least 5 really solid minutes, but you should probably have more 10 because they might need you to stretch. If you're an opener, you should have at least 15 minutes, but you should really have more like 20 to a half hour, because sometimes if it's a slow crowd, you zip through your material and you don't ever want to come up short and have to stall in order to cover your time. And the biggest thing I would say is never work until you're ready. You can do more damage to your career by getting up there too soon, even if, especially to make $10 or $50 or even $100, because what's going to happen is they're going to pigeonhole you based on that series of sets that you do, especially if it's just 1 or 2 or, 1 week. And if it comes up short, it's not going to make the other comics happy. It's not going to make the owners happy. It's not going to make the wait staff happy. And it's certainly not going to make the audience happy. So you might think you did a big deal by getting work soon. I've only been doing comedy for 6 months and I'm getting paid to do it. Like, well, but where are you working? Number one, and number two, how is it going, and how are people perceiving you afterwards? Because what you're trying to build in this business is a good reputation, and that's of being a pro. And a good pro on the worst nights can get laughs because they've done it enough times. And so that's what you're battling here. So I would never suggest anyone to take any of this advice until you're ready to do work and to have a good set. So that's the first caveat I will add to before we do any of these. But the first one is always to give the club booker your press kit. So nowadays you would figure out you ask their email address and you would send them links to your information. If you're just trying to make an initial introduction to yourself, like to a new club, you could say, hey, my name is Chris Stifler. I'm a comedian in the Denver area. Here's my information. I'd like to do a guest spot so you can see what I'm doing, but here's my information to give you my background so you can see that I'm worthy of giving a set to.
Mike, can you define a guest spot? Because you defined MC and an opener and a headliner. What is a guest spot?
That's a good question. A guest spot is where you get to do 5 minutes on an actual show. So this is in front of a paid crowd with other paid professionals, and then they squeeze you up after the MC or after the opener or sometimes after the middle, but very rarely do you get to do a spot after the middle, because the middle's job is to do a long enough set to set the crowd up to get ready to see a 45 or 50-minute set from the headliner. So typically what they're trying to do is they're offering local comedians stage time in order to warm up the crowd more intensely for the two main acts, which is the middle act and the headliner, typically in a regular club.
Do you generally not get paid for a guest spot?
You never get paid for a guest spot.
Never.
Yeah, it's no longer a guest spot if you're getting paid. Typically, a guest spot. I shouldn't say that because I'm sure there's exceptions, but
pretty good rule of thumb is that you're doing it for the 5 to get your reps in or to get seen and be in front of a paid crowd.
You're doing it because it's a paid crowd. It's a real crowd. You talk about a difference. Like when you go up in front of an open mic crowd, typically they're not paid. They're going in. They're the club's staying open because these people are buying drinks. They're watching
comics doing their own material in their head and not listening.
Right, exactly. And now there's a lot of clubs that do good open mics where it's a privilege to be up on that stage. You're still working for free, but you're auditioning and showing that club owner or that club booker that you are worthy of being paid, and you do more than just 5 minutes. Every week you come back and do a different set and they all do well, and now I get who you are in terms of comedy lens and in terms of style. And like, for instance, in Acme in Minneapolis, Lewis Lee runs an amazing open mic on Monday nights, and he trains his audiences and he trains his comedians to work at a high level because of how good those shows are. So the first thing you want to do is, you want to have your press kit. You want to have a website. You want to have some good examples of sets online that show you, maybe on YouTube, that show you doing well. You want your press coverage. So if you've ever gotten any write-ups, if you've ever taken any classes, all the experience, if you've worked as a pro before, or where you do guest spots at, and you just begin to assemble that on a page. And there's a lot of resources online that can help you put together something like that. But then you're going to send them your links to try to get that first guest spot. Another way to do it, the second way, is you have to keep showing up at the club. That's something that Adam Bloom was talking about that I think it bears repeating, which is, man, if you love doing comedy, if you want to be a comedian, you got to watch comics, man. You're not stealing their material. You're not stealing their delivery or style or anything. You're just watching how they do it. How are they taking premises, misdirecting the crowd, and then punching it with something that we didn't expect, and then heightening that and doing that over and over again in a way that we recognize, a lens and a style. And you're just looking at everyone's ability to do that and to not do that. And so when you begin to understand the methodology, you can start to see how people are falling short, and you can go, ooh, he didn't do blah, blah, blah. I'm going to make sure I do blah, blah, blah when I'm trying to do that bit.
It's a good piece of advice because it's like basically getting something out of nothing. Like It's like using your time wisely. If you're not laughing and enjoying the show, you could at least get a little learning activity. I liken it to like how my writing really improved after I used to read a bunch of freshman writing as a professor. When you see shitty writing, you can, and then I rewrite like the introduction for them, and then have them show you like this is what I did as your intro, blah 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 thesis statement. It made my writing a lot better.
It's true, and that's what the same is true when I help you. Anyway,
Hey,
thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much.
popcorn. God
Pop
damn
cock,
it.
pop cock. I'll be here all week, popping cock. So, but yeah, so what's who is it that says Kevin Costner said about showing up? He goes, sometimes you get the gig because you just showed up, and sometimes talented people drop the ball, and if you're there, they need someone. So I remember when I was first starting out, I would just go to every, if I was off, I would go to any club that would have me in town. I was in Chicago, so there's quite a bit. And I would
Mhm.
just show up to, like, if I knew the comedian, I would sit in the back and watch them. If I didn't know the comedian, I would, I knew the staff, or I knew the booker, or I knew the general manager, I knew the manager, and I would just schmooze them and show up and just sit in the back. And if you begin to develop a reputation in town, they'll always let you, if it's not crowded and you know how to stay out of everyone's way, they'll let you sit in the back of the club and watch shows after show after show. And like Adam Bloom was saying, especially if you've already done the show, if you've been in front of that crowd, stick around and watch what the other comics do with that same audience and see how they handle the people that you either just handled well or mishandled, and see what differences they did, and learn from that way. If you're a screenwriter, you watch movies. If you're a musician, you listen to bands. And if you're a writer, you read books. And so if you're a comedian, you got to watch comics. And it's not just good enough to watch them online. You've got to be there at the club. You got to smell the club. You got to hear the energy of the crowd. You got to begin to notice what type of crowds that are there. And if you show up over and over again, someone's not going to show up. And that's when you get a set. I've gotten so many sets in the beginning of my career because I was just there, and they're like, "Hey, Lucas, can you do a spot?" Yeah. And have your 5 minute set ready to go. Assume you're gonna go up, and then if you don't, no big deal. But then if you do, you're mentally and emotionally and energetically ready for that, right? Never show up there and do a bunch of drinking and or show up all high and out of commission, because you show up ready to work, and show up in the outfit that would look good on stage, and just begin to let that club owner know that you are serious about this business and you want work.
That was the first tip we got doing like pro wrestling, yeah, indie WWE wrestling was like when you go to a show, an indie show around the state or whatever, you should always have your boots and your tights in your car just in case. Because a lot of times wrestling shows at shitty bars in Denver, and the guy from Kansas City didn't make it on time yet, so they need a stand-in or a bad guy to. I guess you don't really need any gear. You
Well,
don't need your
I always
shit
bought my
shoes.
my shit shoes and my popcock, and if I
Jazz
had those,
cabbage.
I'm ready to go. The third one, the way to get work, another what did I say? Another way to get booked at a comedy club is to do a live guest spot audition for the owner or booker, and that's the key right there. Like all those the first two, you're just trying to vie for that guest spot. And there's a lot of different ways to get a guest spot, right? You could get a recommendation from other club owners or comics or bookers that you've already done a set with, and that's a great one. Anyone who can, if you can attach yourself to someone who's a legitimate booker or a comic, and they can vouch for you, then typically you'll be given a 5 minute set, especially if that person's working at that club. So it really pays to network with other comedians, and especially when you're beginning, because I mean, always, but in the beginning, nobody knows who you are. But if somebody has seen you, a good headliner or a middle act can go, "Oh, hey, Bill, check out this guy Stifler, man. He always kills when I see him." So, yeah, he can do a guest spot on our show. So that's another one. Yeah, and have the headliner who's working there at the club put in a good word for you. Like, so if you know somebody from other work, or from another club, or from having networked, anywhere, and you can get them to give you a recommendation, that's a great way to get a guest spot, especially if it's their show, because they can determine what they want on that show.
Do you know your first paid gig?
Yeah, I can't remember exactly where it was, but Oh, I know where it was. It was probably in Florida and Orlando at the Comedy Zone, which is where I sort of started out.
How far into your career, or how far into doing open mics?
Couple months, man. Pretty like I was, back then it was. I mean, this was in '90 or '91, so like the comedy boom, it just, hadn't really. It just peaked, and it was kind of on a little bit on the downslide, but it was still like there's so many places to get work. And so, you begin to fill into these open mic or these one nighters, they call them. And so they had a couple of different bookers in Florida that worked the different circuits. And so I began to attach myself to those circuits, and I got like a MC gig. The first time I ever did I won a contest. And so I got to MC for free for the week, but it was a privilege because I'm working with pro comics in front of a real crowd, and it was but when you first get paid, like you're gonna be like you just got to do anything you can. And I would keep my once I got enough paid gigs, I could quit my day job and I could start touring. But that took a while. Like that took a couple of years of doing it, before I got to that place. But making a little bit of extra money on the side, like that started pretty soon because I was very energetic. I'll just say that. So you can impress the booker with your press kit, like like if you have somehow like decent credits from other clubs that you've done, or maybe you're coming in from a different city, and that's helpful. But typically, that's you need someone's word to give you that recommendation. You can have your agent book you a spot. So if you are lucky enough to have an agent already, they'll call ahead, and anytime someone else is calling for you, that's a way better way to do it. That's kind of like a no duh because well, okay, all I need is an agent. That's cool. Oh, I didn't realize how hard it is to get an agent. Whoops. Because if you think about it, an agent's got to make a living making 10 or 15% of what you're making. So you know for them to take a chance on you to represent you, they have to really believe that you're going to make enough money where that's going to be worthwhile.
You made $20 this week.
Right? I
Here's
tell
your
you,
coffee
10% of
money.
that, carry the one. I can buy a soda. Get noticed at the club's open mic. That's why you go to open mics. When you go to open mics, it's difficult, and a lot of nights are kind of sad and quiet. But if you can persevere, then a club owner or booker is going to watch that, and they're going to go, "Hey, that guy or that girl does good on those nights that are tough." And so when I'm booking a club and I have a Wednesday and Thursday that don't always draw a big crowd, I need someone who I know can do that kind of work, and they'll see that at that open mic. Because anyone, I mean, if you're at all decent, you can kill on a Friday and Saturday because those are, usually packed crowds that are really, that they all paid to get in there. And so, that's when it's easy. And I'm not, it's never easy, but it's easier than say a Tuesday where there's, 15 people in the crowd and they're all scattered across, the audience. And, that makes it tougher. Another way to get a guest spot, you schmooze and tip the wait staff and have them recommend you. So believe it or not, a lot of the wait staff have a ear of the owner or the booker. And so if they're all have a buzz about who you are and how you did on those open mics and those other sets, the owner and the booker listen to that. And that could be enough to get you a set. And then the other one was build up a solid comedy reputation in town or online and use those ticket buying fans as leverage. So that's always a great way to, if you're at all a draw, if you do a guest spot and suddenly 20 extra people show up, that's always a way to continue to get guest spots at that club. And then I say, however you get your guest spot, arrive early, dress appropriately, do your time, and have a solid set prepared for maximum delivery. So, be a pro. Show up and be a pro. And no matter how small the crowd is, no matter what night of the week it is, treat it like it's the Saturday night second show and the biggest show of the week.
How did you get linked up with Caliendo? Did you open or guest spot with Frank Caliendo?
I'm embarrassed to admit how I know him. He used to open for me.
Oh,
When I was headlining, he was the middle act. Imagine doing any kind of show after Frank Caliendo gets off the stage. Like he was killing at the middle. And I think he's from Milwaukee. And so I was doing Nick Swartzen was another middle for me. So I had these really, big, powerful guys that would do these middle acts. They just hadn't made it yet. And so Later, when Frank made it and he did, his Lettermans and he was a big name, he hired me to come open for him. And that's how a lot of times you can, you can, that's the number 7 advice, attach yourself to a working headliner. And if you begin to find that your act works well with another comedian's act who's further along than you can begin to propose yourself as a opener for them. And what you have to do, though, like what I had to do, is I had to be very clean because Frank's clean, and I had to be shorter because Frank's a midget. And so I had to go up there on my knees. So that, no, I'm just kidding. We always laughed at each other because I was so tall and he was so short that when I introduced him and brought him up, we would do like some bits about that. I would like pretend like I can't see him, like I didn't know where he was. I would put my arm out, and then I'd have, then I would squat. I would leave the microphone at my height,
Way up
and
high.
I would run back and adjust it for him. We just have fun. And then he had a whole bit that he did about having like a giant dorky opener. So we had, we poked fun at each other, but we're really good friends, so that it made sense. I wouldn't do that to a stranger who I didn't know. Or you could do it once. The fourth thing I said was do open mics and enter a contest at the club. Contests are a great way to get seen. They're not a great thing to count on winning, because typically the best comic never wins the contest. Just ask anyone who's in second or third place.
Right.
And I've often won contests, and I don't think I was the best comedian in the room. So I know, yeah, I've been on both sides of that coin. But those are other ways to impress the booker and the club owner, is just, again, being seen as opposed to telling them with their resume. So the fifth is you take a comedy class at the club. A lot of these clubs, if not most clubs, have a class available that you can take. Usually it's $200 or $300, so it's going to cost you a little bit of money. They're usually about 8 weeks long. You get a professional comedian who's going to nurture you through what it takes to be a comedian, with their version of that. And if they're at all a respectable comedian, they'll teach you the right moves, because they're teaching beginners. And then at the end of that 8 weeks, you're going to have a showcase. And so you have a chance to do a 5 or 10 minute set based on what you learned in that class. And that club owner and booker will be at that showcase to watch, and they're going to see if you're worth rebooking or using. And that's where a lot of openers come from, is doing these comedy contests, or taking that. For taking that comedy class. That pro is going to teach you how to be a good MC. They're going to teach you the skills you need to start a show off with a cold crowd and help the other comics do better by bringing energy and bringing focus to the stage.
I want to use a metaphor. Like, you ever see Fight Club?
Mm-hmm.
And to get in a Fight
I don't
Club,
like
you
to
had
talk
to go.
about it.
Nice. If you say you did like to talk about it, there's basically like a signaling device. Like, you got to jump the hurdle and then you can get into Fight Club. But you knock on the door and you stand there in the rain for 3 days. It's not about staying in the rain. It's about them separating who are really serious and who's not serious. So I wonder if it's similar to, even if you're not going to get anything out of doing X or Y, but it signals that you're the one who's going to put the effort into it. That's going to distinguish you. In economics terms, it's asymmetric information. You can't tell who's high quality or low quality, or who's really into it, who's not into it. But if you add an effortful signal to signal, hey, in the wrestling world, it's show up early and help them put up the ring, or offer to break down the ring in the extra hour after the show's over. How much of that is the equivalent to what you're talking about?
You're having to stand out amongst a lot of people who want the same thing as you. So there's a lot of things you can do that don't cost any money, and then that don't take any talent. Showing up early doesn't take any talent. You just got to have a watch. You know what I mean? And the ability to get to the club. Pitching in if needed. Sometimes, I would hesitate to step in and help the wait staff with any of that stuff, because you're not part of that staff. So there's no reason for you to do that work. But you might do the announcement at the back of the room. You might be, hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Hyenas Comedy Club. Are you having a good night tonight? Oh. Hey, well, let's get ready to see a great show. And you might be that guy. And maybe when you do a good job of that, because you showed up early and no one else on the show wanted to do that because they didn't want to pooch their voice to the crowd yet, now they can count on you for that. And they know you can do a good job. You show up, because it signals to the club that you love this, that you would do this for free, that you even though you won't, like doing free work is tough, because if you do too much of it, that's what they expect out of you. But that brings to number 6: do a favor for the booker or the owner. That's there are a lot of different ways to do a favor for that booker or that owner. Doing the announcements is one. Filling in for somebody until they get there because they showed up late is one. Driving somebody to a radio gig in the morning and watching them do their radio spot is something that can get you on their radar. But showing that you're serious about not just the 5 minutes or 10 minutes of stage time you get, but also the idea of, we're running a comedy club, we're entertaining people, and that takes a group effort to make happen. And if you can become a part of that and show you're serious about that part of it also, that goes a long way for sure to signal to them that you want to be in this business. So number 7 was attach yourself to a working headliner, which we talked about. Number 8 is to kill at a comedy. Oh, I said that the last 3 are fall under the no shit Sherlock
Really funny
category.
and win.
Right. Yeah. So kill at a comedy festival. Well, no kidding. But good luck getting into a comedy festival. I've done several comedy festivals. I did the Just for Laughs Comedy Festival in Montreal. Yeah, and the New Faces, and I did the Aspen Comedy Festival in Colorado,
Oh,
and
I didn't know that.
they were hard to get. I tried out for those multiple times and didn't get them, and I did really well. I thought I did better than a lot of other people, and until I got a manager, I wasn't able to get into the Montreal Comedy Festival, and even then, I had to audition 3 different times. So it's not a given, but if you happen to get to a comedy festival, oh my goodness, what a great way to get work that is, because a lot of bookers and owners show up to those festivals to find new talent. So that's a way that you don't have any TV or any credits yet, but you get in that festival, like a New Faces showcase. Get up there, do your time, and have your lens ready, with your material, and then boom, you have a real good chance of getting more work out of that. That's how I got the Conan O'Brien show, was from the Montreal Comedy Festival. They watched me do that material, and then like a year later, she called me up to come do the show because she remembered me from that festival. So it's definitely a great way to get representation. That's number 9. Again, no shit, Sherlock. Good luck getting representation. Good luck getting someone who's already in the business to double down on you, as if you're going to make them a lot of money, who's never done anything in the business before. That's very difficult. But like, I got my manager, one of my managers, from knowing other comics. And by working with that other comic, that manager saw me and ended up representing me. My second manager I got because Frank Caliendo knew me, and he recommended me to his agent. So there's all different ways to get representation. But once you get someone to say this guy's good, it goes a long way, because anytime someone else calls up for you and puts in a good word, especially if they have a good reputation, now all, like, you've been vetted, you're good, you're good enough to work, according to them. So you get the thumbs up. And
What do you give to the introvert comic that doesn't have the people skills, that you have maybe, or has a hard time making small talk with the other comedians in the bar or in the brewery? Or
if you're funny, it doesn't matter, because your work will speak for itself, and then someone will want to work with you. Like my friend Kevin always says, momentum attracts momentum, and when you don't have momentum, it's kind of ugly. But when you know what you want and you're going towards it, people want to attach themselves to you. They see you as a meteor that's peaking, and so they want to be a part of that ascension. And so, but get better at it. You know what I mean? Like, if you're a comedian, you got to get used to uncomfortable moments. So work through the uncomfortableness of shaking hands and saying hello to people, because it'll go a long way for you. And to not do that, it will really stop you in a lot of different places, and you'd have to be really, really funny to get that done. But like Mitch Hedberg was socially awkward in a lot of ways, and but he was so funny that his manager did all that for him, and then his work just spoke for itself, and he didn't have to beg for anything, eventually. But maybe a lot of people don't know this, but Mitch Hedberg, took him a while to be successful. It wasn't like he just started doing that character and he got famous. He was doing that same material and working on that character for years before anyone knew who he was in San Francisco.
is there an equivalent? So like the pipeline here in Denver is to get working like your notches up on Comedy Works. We have two Comedy Works spots downtown in the Denver Tech Center. But the pipeline here is new talent night. So Tuesdays, you keep on signing up for new talent night and they'll give you a 2 minute spot and your mic goes dead at 2 minutes. And then they give you feedback. And if you do a good 2 minute, they'll invite you back for another 2 minute, and then they move you up to a 3 minute, and then they'll eventually move you to 4 minute. And then, you know, I, as I understand it, you build to be able to do the 5 minute person under there, like they see you as a 5 minute person, and then they'll move you onto a, guest spot or a show. Is that unique to Denver?
No, that's how they do it in just about every town. They're because your local comedians are like kind of like the most abused bunch. You're taken for granted. You're unfunny until you prove otherwise. You're desperate. They see you as all these things because you're local and they know you and they've seen you before, and they've watched you develop. So they've seen you suck and they've seen you struggle. And so they're the hardest ones to prove what you're doing to, like that. When I was in Orlando, that was hard to get work in Orlando, but when I got work in Orlando, finally, I was able to get work in other cities because that work begot other work. So that's how that goes. And here's the thing about these bookers, man. Like Comedy Works has been around for a long time. They've seen everybody. So they immediately know if you're going to work in their room or not. They immediately know if you're pro or an amateur. They immediately know whether or not you are going to bomb on a tough night or do well on a tough night. They just see the patterns because they've seen so many comedians do so many sets. So just don't force yourself to move faster than they'll move you as fast as you need to move. Like I moved faster than I should have moved because my delivery skills were way better than my writing skills. So because there was a need for warm bodies, I excelled quicker than I should have, because by the time I got to where I needed a lot of material, I didn't have the ability to write it quick enough to supply that demand. And so that worked against me, and I had to go back to the road, and I had to like start over again, kind of. So you don't want to have to hit that. That's one of the reasons why I wrote the book, was because I wish I had that at the time. The books would have helped me to give me a process to work on material more often and more frequently do sets with it. And speaking of that, the final way to get work at the No Shit Sherlock 10th one is do a great set on TV or on the internet,
Okay.
become viral. Like, really? Is that going to get you work? Of course it will. It's obvious that if you can begin to get credits, you begin to be a draw. And if you're a draw, that means you bring money to the club. And if you bring money to the club, they're going to work you all the time. That's why a lot of these internet sensations are getting a lot of work. They have 5 or 10 minutes of material, but because it went viral, people show up and want to see them in person. And so they're being booked way before they should be, or if at all. But by the time, if you're going to do a set on TV, typically you're a pretty good comic. Like you can't. It's hard to pass through that muster accidentally, or when you suck and you had one good set. Like you before you even get seen by the TV people, you got to be pretty good already. And then if you do happen to get a TV spot, talk to your local comedy club. Like say if a couple of years you get booked on the Tonight Show or whatever. Call up the Comedy Works and say, hey, I got booked. I got a set on Tonight Show. Can you bring me in that weekend? And I'll promote you on the show. I'll say that I'm working at your club, and they'll
That's
do
what
that. I did that with
because that's what you
Zany
did with
twice.
Zanies. Yeah, I remember you telling me that.
Yeah, with my Tonight Show sets, they immediately, and that's the deal. Bert, the guy who was running the club, Bert Haas, was a general manager at the time, and he had that deal, worked with all headliners. He's like, you're the headliner unless someone gets a set, and then they come in and do that, that week, and then we rebook you. And they do that because it's great advertisement for the club to have Jimmy Fallon say the name of the club, or whoever. Yeah, so that those are the different ways you can get work, and there's a lot of other ways too that you can, that I didn't go over, but those are some basic ways that you can begin to score a gig. But again, I would warn you, don't work until you're ready to do it, because you can do more harm than good if you're not ready. But when you are ready, work really reinforces what you already know. And like I said, work begets more work. And so as you become more deserving of it, you will prove yourself to the club, to the staff, to the other comedians, and you will find yourself to slowly building on your success.